welcome back to Bible class here at the Park Church of Christ here in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where we are going through as an entire church. We're going through The Story, which is this publication by Max Lucado, Randy Frazee, that looks at the entire story of the Bible in the form of a novel, just getting through the entire storyline that we see laid out in Scripture. And today we come to chapter 6, which is in essence the summation of the book of Numbers and Deuteronomy. So when we catch up with the Israelites and Moses here in chapter 6 of the story, they have been at Sinai for almost a year. They have the Ten Commandments, they have the tabernacle, they're living life with God. Everything should be well. The Lord is providing for them, the Lord is forgiving them, the Lord is living in their presence. Things should be okay. But we'll see today that they're not so okay. I want to highlight five different stories, 5 different moments in the book of Numbers that we see that illustrates to us the most important thing that we're doing here, which is continuing to learn about who God is. Remember, the Old Testament is not a history book that's meant to tell us about ourselves. It's an anthology of stories that help us understand the character, the nature of God and who He is, and the God who is guiding us and leading us, and what that looks like for us to live in interaction, in relationship with Him. So I want to highlight 5 different things. Moment number 1, story number 1. You'll find in Numbers chapter 11 or page 72 and 73 in your storybook. We have the story of the quail. So God was providing for His people, but He'd provided manna for them to eat, whatever manna is, a bread-like substance, but also had kind of an olive oil kind of taste to it. But they were upset and they were grumbling because, and this seems so strange to me, but I think there's a reason for it. They were grumbling because things were not as good for them. They were not eating as well as they did back in Egypt. In Egypt, they had meat, they had all these fruits, and they had almost kind of, they were describing this kind of luxurious way of eating, which seems strange because they were slaves in Egypt. And it's almost as if they had forgotten that they were slaves, that their lives, their culture had assimilated so much in Egypt that now they were missing it. They had been delivered from bondage, from slavery, but they were looking back with the sense of, we missed how things were back then. We call that being institutionalized. When maybe you're put in prison and prison becomes more of a home than your home used to be. You're not ever meant to think of it as a home. It's meant to be a temporary place, but you now no longer know how to live outside of it because you've assimilated so much with the culture and lifestyle that was there. That even though God was leading them, God Himself had brought His presence to live among them, they were still complaining that things weren't like they were back in Egypt. So they're asking God for meat. And so we'll see what happens when they ask God for meat and why they did that. The second story I want to look at is as they were about to set out into the desert, into their journey to the promised land. 12 spies were sent. 10 came back falsifying reports of how bad it is because of how difficult they thought it was going to be for them to actually get there. Major doubt filled their minds. And so they brought back, it's not that great. We don't even need to go. Don't worry about it. Where Caleb and Joshua came back and said, no, this is a land flowing with milk and honey. This is a land of amazing resources at our disposal. Let's continue to follow God. So 2 were faithful, 10 were unfaithful. And because of the unfaithfulness of this culture, this generation did not walk straight to the promised land, but God led them on a journey in the desert for 40 years until that generation died out and their kids would actually be the ones to inherit the promised land. So they were sent wandering. Then as they were wandering, we come to this moment where Now they're grumbling for food. Now they're so thirsty. God, what can you do for us here? Moses, what are you going to do? Can you ask God? Can you help us out? So Moses goes to God. God tells Moses, speak to the rock I will show you, and out of that rock will gush water for people to drink, and livestock, and everything you have with you. Water will be provided from this rock. Well, Moses almost obeys. Moses strikes the rock 2 times, seemingly giving himself some of the ownership of what is happening here. And maybe Moses is thinking, I'm just this little bit of just considering what might be happening here. Moses may think, if I just talk to this rock and nothing happens, these people are going to stop following me because they know I don't have the power, and I'm crazy for even talking to a rock and trying to call water out of a rock. So he gets involved. Maybe if I hit the rock really hard, maybe that will help water come out. Well, his disobedience in that moment is what is now going to keep Moses out of the promised land. Moses will not be the one to lead the Israelites into the promised land because of his unfaithfulness and disobedience in that moment. And continued disobedience from God's people. God brought snakes into the land, and snakes were biting the Israelites and killing many of them. So again, Moses says, God, help us out here. God said to Moses, make a bronze serpent and put it on your staff and hold it up. Anyone who is bitten by a snake, whoever looks to the serpent that you have put up on the stick, they will be saved. They will not die. This is in Numbers chapter 21, if you want to follow along, and also page 80 of the story. So Moses made the bronze serpent and held it up to the people, and those who looked to the serpent were healed. And then there's the story of Balaam and Balak, who is king of Moab, hears that this powerful God is with these Israelite people and is afraid of them, so calls on a prophet to speak curses over Israel. And Balaam says, I will speak whatever God tells me to say. And so as Balak wanted curses called down on Israel, what God gives Balaam to speak through him is only blessing. So 5 really interesting stories that we often kind of take as kind of siloed stories, that we take them as just individual things that we can learn from, and certainly we can. But I want to put a common blanket over the whole thing, that there's a sight problem with Israel. Of course, I don't mean sight as in they have 20/80 vision and everything's blurry. I mean, their vision is not aimed at the right place, and so they're not seeing properly. It's almost as if they cannot, in their view, they cannot imagine a world better than it is, a life better than it is right now. You know, as kids, we have these vibrant imaginations, and as adults, we're almost encouraged to put the silly imagination stuff away and start thinking more rationally, right? Well, I don't believe that our imagination needs to mature and grow up. I believe our imagination needs to continue to be sanctified by God so that in His eyes we can continue to see a world as better than it is right now. We can see our life and the lives of those around us as more sanctified than they are right now. So we can continue to follow God where He leads us because He is the one who is doing it. But can we have the vision to just say, God, I don't see it perfectly, but I'm going to keep looking at you. I'm going to keep looking at you. And we see the Israelites struggle mightily with that. Why were they begging for quail? Why were they begging for meat? Because they were looking back. They were looking back at their time in Egypt, saying it was better for us then. Do we do that sometimes? Do we look back and think, man, life was easier before I committed my life to God? I don't know if any of us would really say that, but there's a tendency to see a different lifestyle, to see maybe how things were before, maybe how things used to be, whether it has to do with your commitment to God or not. Maybe just things were better when you were single. Maybe things were better when you had more money. Maybe things were better in this situation or that. But we look back, and so now our eyes are now taken off of God because we're now looking into our past instead of focusing on Him. So their complaining comes from looking back. And then you have the 12 spies who looked into the land and saw something difficult. They looked out at their life and saw, I don't know how I can do this. There's too many things in the way of me getting to where I want to be, so I'm not even going to try. Well, they had doubt because they were looking out into the land and their circumstances and not keeping their eyes focused on God. Moses had this moment of disobedience, and it's potentially because God gave him a command that had nothing to do with him. Just speak to the rock and water will come out. Still wanting to partner with Moses, still letting Moses lead, but saying, Moses, you don't need to do anything. Just speak to the rock and it'll come out. And Moses took some of the initiative upon himself and said, oh, no, I'll help you, God. Don't worry, I'll help you. And so when Moses sought to insert his own will into this is when he was now disqualified from entering into the promised land. So it was disobedience because Moses was looking just in at himself and saying, if this doesn't go well, they're not going to follow me anymore. So I'm going to do something to help it out. It was Moses' own pride and disobedience that disqualified him for the promised land. And so it was disobedience because he was looking in. So we have complaining because they look back, doubt as they looked out, and now a disobedience as we look in. And then the snakes come into the land. The snakes come into the land and they are biting the people, and they are suffering as long as they continue to look down. As long as I continue to see the snake bites and see all the danger around me, as long as I continue to focus on that, I will continue in my suffering. But the moment I look up, the moment I look up at what God has provided for me is when I'm saved. The moment we look to Jesus, that is the moment. That is when God says, now you are looking in the right direction. And now I can bring you out of your suffering because now you're looking in the right direction. And Balam's donkey had a really difficult time following Balaam's instructions, and he didn't know why. Balaam was going down the road just doing what he thought he was supposed to do, but the donkey wouldn't let him. So he gets mad at his donkey and is talking to him, whipping him, and his donkey finally speaks up. It's like, hey, is this called for? First of all, I don't normally do this, right? So maybe I'm doing it for a reason. And the Lord opens Balaam's eyes, and he sees the angel of the Lord ahead of him with his sword drawn. What a sight that must have been. But Balaam it wasn't that his sight was looking back or in or out. It was Balaam's sight to the importance of what was happening, to the main thing that was happening. His vision was completely cut off from it at all. He was not able to see at all what the truth of the matter was. And so God opened his eyes that he may see. So Balaam was filled with confusion because his eyes, his spiritual eyes, were closed. And so it is God who opens his spiritual eyes and sees and allows him to see what's really going on here. So what happens in each of these situations? Well, God does bring quail into the land and give it to his people, and they eat. But they don't always continue to look toward God. The 12 spies caused the entire nation to be sent wandering for 40 years and that entire generation to die out. The water from a rock, yes, the people drank, but Moses disqualified himself from being in the promised land. The bronze snake, the people were healed, but it was also a moment of judgment for them as they continued to grumble against God. But a healing was offered to them. A salvation was offered to them by looking up at what God provided. And as the people were down in the camp, grumbling, complaining, suffering, being confused, up on the mountain was one who desired to call out curses down upon Israel and could only say blessings because of God. There's a verse I want to highlight with this. Chapter 6 of the story goes through Numbers, but also into Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy, let me read you one verse from Deuteronomy. It's going to, I think, sum up our time together here. Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 9 says, "Only be careful and watch yourselves closely so that you do not forget the things your eyes have seen or let them fade from your heart as long as you live. Teach them to your children and to their children after them." Be careful to not forget the things your eyes have seen. And is that a word for us today? Do not forget what the Lord has done. Do not forget what the Lord has done all the way through Scripture, what the Lord has provided for us in his salvation through Jesus Christ. Don't forget that he's done that. But also don't forget what he's done in your life. I think all of us at some level can look back and see the hand of the Lord to the extent that we look for it, and our eyes we're allowing God to open our eyes to it. To that extent, we can look back and see that the Lord has been so faithful in so many ways, in so many different circumstances. The Lord continues to be faithful. Don't forget what the Lord has done. Don't forget how far the Lord has brought you. Because the moments in your past that God has healed and forgiven and clarified and sent you into a better place of understanding and faithfulness, do you not think God will do that again? God will do that again because that's who he is. God tells Moses at the burning bush, "I am who I am," or "I will be who I will be." I am who I am in perpetuation. I am who I am forever. There's a perpetual nature spoken into the grammar of those words. Into perpetuity, in all through time. I am who I am, and I will be who I will be. I will not change. And so don't forget the things that your eyes have seen, or let them go from your heart, because that is the same God that we're serving today. That is the same God that we worship. Man, I pray that our eyes can continue to be open. Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Open the eyes of my heart. I want to see you. I don't want to necessarily, I don't feel like I need to even work on fully grasping my circumstances or understanding my suffering or understanding the plight that I'm in or understanding the hand that I've been dealt. I don't feel like I need to spend a lot of time and energy and life trying to figure that out. And once I figure that out, I'll know how to get out of it. And God says, just keep looking to me. Keep looking to me. And I will give you provision that will give you clarity, that will give you peace, that will give you understanding, and it will give you salvation. God is the one who saves us through the blood of Jesus. God has done what is necessary through Jesus for our salvation and our sanctification and our healing and our peace. We only need to continue to keep our eyes on God. God is the one who's doing this. God is the one who made the promise that he will make this nation great. And he's going to continue to do that for the people of Israel, even through major disobedience and through all kinds of turmoil and persecution and unfaithfulness. God remains faithful in what he asks for us. Keep your eyes on me. Keep your eyes on me. Have you ever wanted to walk a straight line over a long distance? If you keep your eyes down and try to just walk a straight line, imagine you're walking through the snow and you leave footprints. If you look down and just continue to walk a straight line, you have a goal up there, but I'm gonna make sure I stay right in the line. You're gonna look back and see that you were all over the place. But if you will keep your eyes up and focused on your target, you will look back and see that you have walked in a perfectly straight line because your eyes have been fixed where they need to be fixed. Let's fix our eyes on the author and the perfecter of our faith. Fix our eyes on him, because everything else will lead us to confusion and doubt and disobedience and suffering. Keep your eyes focused on God, and he will make your path straight. Love you guys. Have a great rest of your day.